Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Recently, I went house hunting in Toronto and it was peak winter, right? It is still peak winter. In fact, sorry if this video is a little bit dark, it is still peak winter and it's impossible finding natural light. But yeah, so some of my non-negotiables were, I wanted in-suite laundry because I wanted an older building because I wanted space, more on that in a second. But I wanted somewhere with in-suite laundry because most older buildings actually don't have in-suite laundry. I wanted it then because I work from home and that's quite important. Again, space, right? And then I wanted a balcony. The balcony was the most important non-negotiable because sometimes you want to be at home but not in your house, if that makes sense. And then you just want to, in the summer, just, go outside and enjoy fresh air, right, without necessarily leaving your house. So yeah, I wanted a balcony, huge non-negotiable. I wanted a kitchen island. Right now, this one was difficult because it turns out most places, I think there's a name for it. It's like a flat kitchen setup where you just have like the cooking space and that's it. And I was like, no, this wasn't for me. Also, context, it took a while. It took lots of viewings, but we'll get to that in a second. I also wanted space, right? So this one is really important for me because I just like to be in a house where like air flows in and flows all the way through. And because of that, I really wanted like, something that was 600 square foot upwards. Right, so that also, was a non-negotiable. And I wanted lots of natural light. Now, the natural light was difficult to find because it was peak winter. And going apartment hunting in peak winter, there's no sun, all the days are gloomy. So you're always thinking, how do I actually know that this is going to be bright in the summer, right? And finally, I wanted something that was close to the subway because I don't drive. And, if I want to get out, I don't want to have to wait like 20-30 minutes for buses. In fairness, the buses are quite frequent in my experience and the trains too. But you have to actually be close to the train because like peak winter, I'm not trying to dig through snow. And this has actually been a very brutal winter, right? So yeah, those were my non-negotiables. In-suite laundry, a balcony, loads of space, 600 square foot plus, ideally, natural light, close to the subway, and a kitchen island. So yeah, these were some of the apartments I viewed really. So let me know which of them you think is good and which of them you would take for the price. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, guys. So yeah, enjoy the video. So we start off strong with 70 Roehampton. This was on the 16th floor, 650 square foot. There was no den, but this was the coat closet, which was pretty decent. The kitchen was tucked away, which I really liked, and it was big. There was lots and lots of storage, and there was an in-suite, dishwasher, which was pretty decent size as well. Lots of storage, which meant, you'll be cooking and this will be comfortable. And because again, it was away from the main living space, it was pretty good. Then we move on to the ensuite laundry, which again was pretty decent, good washing drying unit, and it was tucked away from the living space, so that was good. Then the bathroom, there was a bathtub and your towel hanger and stuff like that. But the thing was, the toilet seat itself was pretty small, which was not something I was aware of until I started house hunting in Toronto, but pretty decent size. Again, peak winter, so not much with natural lights, but the room itself was quite small. I felt like if you put a queen size bed in there, that's 90% of the space gone. And also the wardrobe itself was quite small, which meant a lot more furniture stuff you buy and no. But then the balcony was pretty decent. I believe it was south it's facing, and yeah, it was pretty decent. Starting off in the living area downstairs, which was not bad. This was 89 Dunfield and this was 2,500, and it came with parking actually, which was decent. We'll start off with the den. Someone was living here, so I couldn't really get a full view. This was the ensuite laundry. The dryer in this unit seemed a little bit too small for me, but then the bathroom was the biggest deal breaker because it was right in between the den and the main bedroom, which I don't know, it just was not given for me. I didn't like the layout, and then there wasn't a lot of storage in the bathroom. It felt a little bit tight. I don't know if it's because someone was living in there at the time of the viewing, but it just all felt a little bit tight and cramped. Then we move on into the main bedroom. From here it looked pretty fair. It's not the biggest, but there was enough natural light coming in even in peak winter, which I thought was a plus. And then there was a his and her storage, which was good because then you could, put your coats on one side and clothes on the other side, which was again a plus. But then this angle of the room, it gave me a little bit more perspective because then you need more storage, and then once you put storage in this, it's all gone. The living space itself was all right. You could fit like a large couch, as you can see, and the residents currently had the dining setup as well, which I thought was good use of the space. I probably wouldn't use a dining setup. And then we have like a pretty long balcony, to be fair, and I think that's a huge plus. But then I couldn't really get over how small and awkward the toilet was. So this is the rest of the living space and the kitchen, which was pretty decent size. Actually, I like the fact that it's again sort of as soon as you come in, you're in the kitchen, which meant a bit more storage. And then you could use probably bar stools in the kitchen as opposed to a full-on dining setup. But that's just where my mind was going. And then you have the storage closets and all that for your coats and all that. Pretty decent sized living room, if I'm being honest, but there was just something about the toilet that just was not given for me. It just seemed a little bit too small. But yeah, it was a pretty decent option though. Stop, we have 7 Broadway, which was, as soon as I walked in, I was actually sold. I like the white cabinets in the kitchen. There was lots of storage, not as much as the first unit I viewed, but pretty decent amount of storage. But the good thing with this space was the kitchen space itself was quite big, so you could actually have like 2-3 people in here, and I wouldn't say comfortably, but there was enough space to sit down and stretch around, and that was pretty decent size. The bedroom itself was also quite good. There was a lot of natural light coming in even in peak winter, which was a plus. But the downside with this one was I didn't like the size of the storage in the room, like the the closet. And then there was this thing called a solarium, which I did not really fancy. Fair enough, there was a lot of fresh air coming in, but I wanted a balcony for a balcony, right? I didn't want like a half and half in between. But then the living space itself was pretty decent, but the huge thing that was a no-no was the TV and speakers were already fixed, and I did not really like that because it meant having to pay a little bit more to have that changed, and I think the landlord said he was not going to do that, so that was why this was a no-no for me. Pretty decent size coat closet. I think that could fit like a couple coats, which again, peak winter would not be too bad. And then as always, the ensuite laundry. This was actually one of the bigger sizes of washing machine and dryers that I had seen. And then the bathroom, oh my god, I feel like if the landlord was a little bit more willing, I would have taken this one because the bathroom was pretty decent. But downside though, there was no bathtub, just a pretty decent shower unit. But yeah, it was actually quite big, and that was option 3. Next up, we had 39 Roehampton. This was listed at 2,200 and it was 550 square foot. Pretty decent amount of natural light coming into the bedroom to start off with. And this unit had 2 bathrooms, which I'll get to in a second. But I felt like you didn't need 2 bathrooms. It was sort of like a waste of space in my honest opinion. But yeah, this was the first bathroom, which was in the main main bedroom, which again, it had just a very, very tiny shower unit, which I thought was I would have preferred if like there was a bathtub in the main bathroom, if that makes sense, as opposed to just having this little bathroom there. And then there wasn't enough storage again in the bathroom, and that was just not it for me. But it was a pretty decent sized toilet. And then the ensuite laundry, similar to a previous unit I had looked at, it was quite small, but then there was a den, which was a huge plus. But again, for 550 square foot, I felt like it was almost cramped. It was almost like an afterthought putting in a den in there. But yeah, this is the first bathroom which I was like, why didn't you just put this in the bedroom instead? Pretty decent size, lots of lights, not enough storage, but I think I sort of get it because there are 2 bathrooms and this will probably be for guests anyways. And then there was the coat closet, which pretty decent size, nothing too out of the ordinary. What I did not like was the layout of the space itself. Like, where am I supposed to put a TV and a couch? Where? Like it's like the walls were just too small, and then I think it's called, I don't know, there's a name for this, like flat walled kitchens that we have in Toronto, which yeah, it seemed too small for me though. It was just not giving. There was just it was too small. So that was why this was a no-no, but this was a pretty decent option though. Next up, we had 25 Broadway. This was 650 square foot, listed at 2,450, and it had parking included, I believe, which was again pretty decent. I like the balcony because it came already sort of done. I think the previous tenants put like grass in there, and this was the living space, which was quite big. And there was a lot of natural light coming in. The kitchen I also liked, and I liked this little island they had going on. It was perfect because it meant, you could eat and then cook separately, and that I liked without having to break the bank on buying like a couch or like some bar stools to set up. And then there was a lot of storage. I like the storage and I like the way it was set up, because then again you could be cooking and still have people walking around, which was pretty decent. Lots of storage on the island as well. And this was the den, but it's not little, but this wardrobe thingy could not be moved. Apparently it's fixed, and I don't know how I felt about that. The room itself was alright. There was a lot of natural light again for peak winter, which was a huge plus. The wardrobes were one of the bigger ones I had seen. It's so weird because it's like the same shape as others, but there was just a lot more space in this one, which again, it was a huge selling point for me. And then I love the natural light, I love the balcony as well. And then we move on to the coat closet, which was again good storage units. It was a good storage size on that one. But then the bathroom was the biggest selling point for me, because this was quite big. It was well lit, not enough storage in the bathroom, but that was a small price to pay because it was well lit and it had a lot of space in there, and it did not feel cramped or stuffy, which I really, really liked. So yeah, decent option. Next up, we have 25 Holly Street on the 11th floor. It was quite small, but not small at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like the shape was well cut out. Like you had clear divisions between like the kitchen, for instance, and the living space. It wasn't the biggest of kitchens, but it felt very practical. But this was one of the bigger fridges or fridge freezers that I had seen, which was a huge plus for the space. But yeah, it just felt like someone sat down and was like, you know what, we're clearly going to define how this space is going to be. You're going to live here, work here, cook here. It just felt really, really well designed. And that was a huge plus because it wasn't the biggest. Like I said, it was 550 square foot. And this was the bedroom. Again, big windows, so lots of natural light. Bear in mind, this was peak winter and you had this much natural light, which was really, really decent. But the room itself was quite small and the layout was awkward, so I don't know how it would have fit in a queen size bed in there. Pretty decent balcony though. But the thing was, I felt like they spent more time on the balcony than the rest of the house. It's weird, like the balcony was too big for the house, but this was meant to be the den, which is meant to be as soon as you walk in, which I was like, I don't know how that's going to work for me. Pretty decent sized bathroom though, but something about the bathroom just felt a little bit cramped. I guess maybe it's like the layout of it though. It just seemed like you walk in straight and that's the whole thing. Back to 89 Dunfield, and this time we're in an empty apartment, so I could appreciate the space a little bit better. Pretty decent sized kitchen, to be fair. This was on the 23rd floor, so it was slightly higher, and you can already see that there was a bit more natural light coming in. And yeah, pretty decent size. I think like all the electrical appliances were the same size as the previous one, but the coat closet, maybe because it was empty, it just seemed a little bit bigger. The living space itself seemed slightly bigger, and maybe because it was higher, there was more natural light. But I confirmed, yeah, my suspicion, which was the room itself was a bit on the small side. It looks pretty decent, but once you put like a double bed in there, and because you would need extra like cabinets and storage, it would just take up all the space. Again, we had the his and hers wardrobe going on, which at this point, I guess like because of the size of the room itself, I was already over it. And the bathroom again just confirmed it, because like this was just a bit too small, awkwardly placed. Pretty decent sized tub, but no. The den itself was not too bad, but now that I looked at it when it was empty, it seemed like it was going to be a little bit small. And yeah, but then you have your ensuite laundry again, and like I said before, the drying unit was just small, but the balcony was pretty decent though, and maybe because it was higher, maybe the sun came out, I don't know, it just seemed. This was one of the smaller units actually, and it was priced accordingly, I guess. The bedroom itself was not too bad, but not enough natural light coming in. Pretty decent sized balcony, but yeah, the kitchen itself was alright. There was an island which I thought was good, but I did not like the pillars in the room. I felt like that took away more space than it wanted to, and then the bathroom itself was a little bit too small. Sticking with the same building though, but this time on the 3rd floor. This was listed at 2,600. It was 834 square foot. Best apartment I had viewed in my honest opinion. Like, look at how much natural light is actually coming into the space. The kitchen was not the biggest, but I could pass on that because if you put an island in that space, you'll be fine. However, the fridge and freezer were quite small, which was, not good. The den was perfect. The den was pretty much like a second room. I mean, like, this is probably the biggest den I had seen in Toronto, and I felt like this den would like rival some 1-bedrooms in other spaces. Drying and washing unit, again, pretty decent. The bathroom though was where I had like because in the bathroom it just felt a little bit too small. Like, it felt like for how grand the space was, the bathroom was just too small. The rest of the living space, again, it was really, really decent. Lots of natural light. The balcony felt like an afterthought, but we won't go into that. The bedroom and the wardrobe was quite small, but to be honest, I felt like it was a small price to pay because there's enough space to have your dressers and all that in there. So yeah, I don't know which of these you guys would probably take, but for me, I was leaning towards this because there's just enough natural light. There's just a lot and lot of space. But yeah, let me know which one you prefer.